The key issue when it comes to Donald Trump's political legacy is not John Kelly's criticisms or the influence of figures like Dick Cheney and his neoconservative allies, but rather Trump's unwavering Zionism. John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff, I see as a disgruntled employee airing grievances. And it's nothing more than that. He's not some sort of harbinger of a supposedly incoming dictatorship. The core issue is that we are already living under a de facto Zionist occupied dictatorship, regardless of which political party, red or blue, is in power. Trump's foreign policy, particularly his Middle East agenda, has been heavily influenced financially and ideologically by Zionist interests. From moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem to recognizing Zionist sovereignty over the Golan Heights, his presidency demonstrated a firm alignment with Zionism, reinforcing the idea that U.S. politics is largely shaped by these influences, despite whatever leaked supposed father-son relationship Trump said he had with Mahmoud Abbas. This commitment, this actual commitment to Zionist priorities is not a deviation from the norm. But under his presidency, it was an acceleration of a bipartisan trend that has dominated American foreign policy for decades. He accelerated it and gave great leeway to Genocide Joe to enact what has been enacted during the post first term Trump era. The real focus, therefore, should be on the overwhelming influence of Zionist lobbies and how their agenda transcends these kayfabe partisan divides, cementing a status quo that suppresses dissent, shapes U.S. policy in the Middle East, and compromises this nation's moral principles. Whether Trump or a Democratic leader is in power, Zionism will remain a dominant force, making it a deal breaker for anyone who seeks genuine autonomy and sovereignty for the U.S. The only devil's advocate that I could play in pulling the lever for Trump is that it would be a way to punish Biden and punish Kamala Harris for sponsoring, financing, giving diplomatic cover to Israel's barbarism. John Kelly's Zionism should not be overlooked or excused in the broader conversation about his criticisms of Trump. While Kelly may present himself as a voice of reason or a whistleblower against Trump's say authoritarian tendencies, his own allegiance to Zionist interests reveal a deeper alignment with the very forces that perpetuate U.S. subservience to Israel's genocidal ambitions. Kelly, like many high-ranking military and political figures, has operated within an establishment deeply influenced by Zionist lobbying groups such as AIPAC, which have long shaped U.S. foreign policy. His role as a former Marine Corps general and White House Chief of Staff reflects the military-industrial complex's ongoing support for U.S. involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts that disproportionately serve Israeli interests. Let's be clear. If Trump's authoritarianism was so scary to Kelly during the time that he was chief of staff, one would have thought he would have left and not facilitated the Zionist agenda that the administration Kelly worked under delivered. His agenda is apparent, being in that same horrendous lane. Therefore, it aligns with policies that fuel perpetual war in the region, undermine Palestinian rights, and destabilize nations for the sake of maintaining the Zionist settler colonial project's dominance. So, really, I have to say that in my condemning of Kelly Zionism, that I find it crucial because it underscores that his opposition to Trump is not about upholding democratic principles, but about maintaining a status quo that favors the Zionist occupation's influence in what should be sovereign American politics by focusing solely on his disagreements with Trump's leadership. Ziocrats risk ignoring the broader bipartisan consensus that upholds Zionism as a core tenet of United States war policy. A consensus that Kelly, despite his critiques of Trump, the accelerator of Zionist devilry, remains very much a part of it. And that really brings me to this next topic. We got a Republican and a Democrat in cahoots, perpetuating violence, not against Palestinians in this case, but against a reporter, an unwitting reporter. Disgraced former Congressman Adam Kinzinger and a Missouri Senate nominee, Lucas Kuntz, clearly had no business organizing a shooting stunt today. in an attempt to pull off what was supposed to be a picture-perfect political photo op, they engaged with something far more dangerous, gunning down the said reporter. I find it absolutely incredible. These guys who are supposed to, I guess, represent responsibility and leadership, thought it was a brilliant idea to shoot metal plates with an AR-15 just 15 feet away. And then they're surprised when someone almost gets killed. It's amateur hour at the best. Even I, a far from any sort of marksman, would know better. And this is just downright reckless. I can't. That's the most charitable depiction that I can paint for you guys. But this isn't just a one-off incident in this campaign trail. Which is why I feel like if, the country ever came to civil war, and it could happen, and the elites at the top would they would hash it out, and there'd be no holds bar about it. But this incident really reminds me of what happened with Tim Walz, right? Minnesota's Tim Walz. He's already shown the world he doesn't have the first clue about how to properly handle a firearm. And now we're seeing a disturbing trend. Politicians playing cowboy, who have like zero idea of how to use a gun, but playing around with the guns that they clearly cannot control, putting innocent people at risk in the process. On accident, of course, except for when they're doing it on purpose. The hypocrisy is astounding. I could sit here all day, talk about genocide in its rawest and most brutal forms, about the unjust killing of civilians, the destruction of homes, and the suffering of entire populations, and somehow people will still slap the militant anti-Semite label on me just for calling out these atrocities. But here's the truth. You don't need to mention Jewish people as a whole, the commandment following Jewish people, who, unlike the Zionists, follow the 8th and 6th Amendment, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, to talk about genocide, killing, oppression, and state-sponsored violence, land theft, stealing. The act of criticizing the state of Israel for its policies is not anti-Semitism. It's holding an apartheid government accountable. Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions, he's just another loudmouth who doesn't get it. A guy who uses his platform to push shallow takes on complex issues, defending actions that should never be justified under any circumstance. If you think it's okay to bomb civilians, to turn a blind eye to the slaughter of innocents in the name of defense, then you are just as complicit. You are part of the problem. No pun intended, Dave Smith. But yeah, no, fuck Dave Smith. But more importantly, fuck even more Ethan Klein. Fuck Destiny. And fuck Ben Shapiro's bitch ass, whiny ass, fucking shrivelly ass voice. And fuck Twitch. You know, I disagreed with Frogon on her wish that U.S. soldiers get PTSD, as I feel many are victims of the U.S. military's predatory recruitment schemes. But I welcome her arrival here on Kick. I would take interest in a conversation with her, even sometime. If she would even, give me the time of day, of course. Because ultimately, fuck the IDF and the U.S. military for their genocidal actions, and more importantly, fuck U.S. hegemony. And on that very topic of U.S. hegemony, Western propaganda outlets are now being forced to wake up and face the reality that after years of delusion and denial, the narrative they've clung to, that Vladimir Putin is isolated on the global stage, has been shattered to a million pieces as he is surrounded by an ever-growing group of allies within the BRICS Plus framework. For years, these outlets ignored the warnings, praised the sanctions that have boomeranged at us so hard. It shocks. It could leave one in disbelief. The world, particularly in the global South, has grown tired of Washington's Zionist-occupied Washington's self-righteous lectures, tainted by its decades-long record of illegal invasions, bombings, and coups. The blood-stained hands of Western powers, led by the U.S., have left a trail of destruction across continents, while hypocritically preaching democracy, human rights, and rule of law. But the rest of the world wasn't listening then. And they aren't now. We have been pointing out for years that Zionist-occupied Washington's two-faced foreign policy, one that has turned entire regions into war zones, has alienated much of the world. This growing resentment has led to the global South and rising powers, starting with the original BRICS members, Brazil, or Russia, India, China, South Africa, all particular victims of U.S. meddling across the globe, to increasingly align with Moscow's stance on one undeniable fact: Washington's imperial hegemony must come to an end. Now, as the BRICS Plus summit unfolds, these so-called journalists who have the reasoning capacity of goldfish sit in shock and horror. They're confused and baffled as to why leaders of the global South aren't obediently following their hypocritical calls to isolate Russia for their supposed imperialism. They cannot comprehend why these nations refuse to bow to the moral lectures from the hypocrites of the West, whose records are far from clean. The fact that the calls to isolate Russia are made by people who claim that their records are clean. This is absolutely laughable. So instead of isolating Russia, many are embracing new forms of economic and political cooperation, signaling that Washington's, Zionist-occupied Washington's era of unquestioned dominance is fading, and fading fast. The West, so used to dictating terms to the rest of the world, is now seeing that its influence is waning as a new multipolar world order takes shape. And man, oh man, we the fact that the U.S. Particular commentators that I'm about to talk about right now, like Ben Shapiro, would proselytize against Russia for the special military operation in Ukraine. And then you see this new viral fucking clip of Ben Shapiro's celebration of Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza. Specifically, he said he celebrates it. It's not only morally bankrupt, but also a stark example about how Zionists twist facts to justify atrocities. Shapiro blames Hamas for civilian casualties, ignoring the disproportionate force that Israel wields and the continued subjugation of millions in Gaza. A subjugation that predates October 7th, Alaska flood. His framing of Israel as a beacon of restraint is laughable, considering the decades-long occupation and illegal settlements. The only people who celebrate the burning of children are Moloch worshippers, and he is certainly one. He has rejected Christ and should be chased out of the country, for which he places his loyalty after Israel anyway. Shapiro's rhetoric for all the shock and awe that one might take at my rhetoric, his rhetoric exemplifies the broader Zionist narrative that seeks to paint Israel as perpetually under threat, while it continues to oppress an entire population and saber rattle with its neighbors, poking nests and crying to the dispensationalists, Protestants in the United States, who will come to Israel's rescue, because those dispensationalists don't recognize that Israel is not a plot of land, that Israel, true Israel, spiritual Israel, is the church, Christ's body on earth. And Christ said that his kingdom was not of this earth. The fact that that part of the Gospels is lost on dispensationalists just goes to show how non-Christian dispensationalists really are, how they are just Zionist Jews in Christian face. So Shapiro's attempt to shift blame entirely onto Hamas is an oversimplification that fails to account for the real power dynamics and historical context of this conflict. This is not self-defense. It is the enforcement of apartheid under the guise of national security. By lauding these actions, Shapiro intentionally ignores the humanitarian catastrophe that the Israeli blockade, which predates October 7th of last year, has imposed on Gaza for years, strangling the population, which has already been subjected to bombings, raids, Israeli calorie controls, and evictions. To applaud such acts of oppression is to stand on the wrong side of history, is to spit in the face of God, cheerleading for the obliteration of human rights in the name of Zionist supremacy. This brings us to the end of tonight's political stream. But we're going to start streaming games as well, with of course less well-prepared points and more casual conversation. But before I leave, I want to check the chat real quick. So I'll give. So let me take on this point. BRICS was created by J.P. Morgan, and they are just shifting from east to west. And Hamas also says BRICS have the same policies as NATO. Well, that point I would absolutely disagree with. Now, because BRICS is essentially headed by Russia. So I don't know how. I really don't know how you could make that point. You know, it's has J.P. Morgan made investments into BRICS. I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't analyzed any links between J.P. Morgan and BRICS. That's something that I'll check, and I'll either confirm or debunk on the next stream as I platform that comment on here. But with regards to that second comment that I just platformed, no, BRICS does not have the same policies as NATO, NATO being the arch nemesis of Russia. So I guess take Hamza's comments with whatever grain of salt. Because that second comment, is just absolutely false. But I don't know about the first one though. The JP Morgan stuff. Could that be true? I don't know. I mean, I addressed the topic of kayfabe earlier and controlled opposition earlier in the stream, and I talk about it all the time. It's probably one of the biggest words and some of the biggest words in my vernacular. But it's always worth a look. So that's why I don't dismiss the first claim made by Hamza from YouTube over there. So I'm signing off. Please, everyone have a most pleasant night. It's always my aim to get these things to half an hour, and that's what we've done. It's crazy. BRICS does actually give me a lot of hope for the future of the of having ethical international economics. And that's the potential I see in that realm. I love you all.